So Behind the Moon is my sixth play, and we premiered the play at the Tarragon Theatre in Toronto in Jan of 2023, I think. We closed the run, the Victoria run at the Belfry today. So this very evening we have the closing night, and I start rehearsals for Behind the Moon for the Vancouver premiere tomorrow morning. Is a show that had a really interesting sort of trajectory for me. So the last play that I had produced, not the last, the one before that was called The Men in White, and the Arts Club premiered that show. And in that, there's a character named Abdul who works in a restaurant. But the play isn't really about him, and it's not his story. He's one of the characters in the play. And long after the play was done, one of the monologues that Abdul performs in the show kept sort of coming back to me. I kept thinking about that monologue and the situation that he was in, which was a very painful situation for an immigrant to be in. And even a year or a year and a half after the show was done, the character stayed with me. And when that happens, I think it's a blessing, because they keep haunting you. There's something that is unexplored as yet about that character's internal life. And so I started thinking about that character, and I wrote a short story called Behind the Moon. A year or so later, when Richard Rose, who was at the time the artistic director of the Tarragon Theatre in Toronto, asked me what I was working on because he wanted to commission a new work from me, I immediately thought of the same character, and I wrote the first 10 pages of what is now Behind the Moon. And again, that's been the trajectory of this play. It started from The Men in White, went into a short story, and now it's emerged in a completely different form of these three men from India who moved to Canada at different points in their lives. I shouldn't say always, but I have sometimes heard people say, I came here in search of a better life, whether it's Canada or Australia or the US, or this phrase always stayed with me. Yeah, we came here in search of a better life. And my question is, what is a better life? That's something that I questioned a lot when I came here. Now, mind you, I didn't come here for a better life. I had a fantastic life in Bombay. In fact, my question was the opposite. What on earth am I doing here? When I moved here as a student, an international student in 1998, of course, I knew the answer to that. I wanted to become a writer. And for me, finding my purpose, that was the definition of a better life. So it's about chasing your dream, and it's also in a way a cautionary tale, maybe, like our dreams, our desires, we need to keep track of them, and that's what these characters are in search of. They're all chasing something, and they did not think of the consequences. They did not think of, okay, what are the repercussions of following something with that much desire. So these are the sort of starting points of Behind the Moon. And eventually when I wrote it, and the real thing is getting into the internal world of these characters, it's a play about mental health. What happens when we move to a different country and we feel completely isolated. Coming from India, especially a city like Bombay, it's 22 million people. The locality that this one particular character comes from, Ayub in the play, it's a very full life. It's friends, it's neighbors, it's relatives, it's a whole community that you wake up with and you go to sleep with. You never go to sleep alone. Even if you live alone, you go to sleep with an entire community. At least the feeling of, being immersed in this place where people do care about you. And this sense of moving to Toronto, working in a restaurant and feeling completely isolated, and the impact that has on his mental health, and also being caught up in the immigration system, which today, unfortunately, is a very timely sort of issue. So what started in 2016, 2017 as The Men in White, today, almost 10 years later, has become so important to discuss. I wouldn't have perceived that, but that's the beauty about when you listen to your characters. At some point, they know more than you, and they keep knocking on the door of the imagination, wanting to tear through that membrane, that fabric, and you have to allow it. I mean, it's not even allow, they just do it anyway. They come through anyway. But am I completely surprised? Both yes and no, because there is a system in place that needs to be looked at, and that is a huge challenge for immigrants. There's so many of them who feel completely isolated. They come here expecting one thing, um, but they don't think about the emotional and spiritual toll that that move might take.